Adriana will not be attending this evening. And Rob
Kyle,
will.
can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Henry, if you're talking, I can't hear you, but can you hear me?
I can hear you, but can anyone else hear me?
Yes, I can
It
hear
would-
you, Henry.
Yes.
Both of you.
It would help if I turned my volume on my computer, so.
Cool.
Use air.
Adriana will not be attending tonight. Eric's here. Okay, we're good. Rob will be late.
Okay, so if we have 3, we're okay, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Board of Libraries Trustees meeting of April 13th, 2021. The time is 6:01. I'll invite Jinder to call roll.
All right, Trustee Duke Hughes. Trustee Hahn.
Here.
Trustee Lentini.
Here.
Trustee Ross. Chair Cortez.
Here. Thanks. I will also invite Jinder to explain how the public can participate in this evening's agenda.
All right, I don't see any attendees, but good evening, everyone. Viewers are welcome to provide public comment online through Zoom or by telephone at 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 934-405-24339#. If you are watching the meeting on Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please select the raise hand feature either on the bottom of your screen or through the participants icon. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period. When it is your turn to speak, you will be notified that the host is inviting you to participate. You will need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Once you are unmuted, you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments.
Thank you, Jinder. Sorry, I don't know if anyone has bad allergies like I do right now. So I'll try and mute and cough on the side. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? Any board members or anyone have amendments? Okay, I don't see any. The minutes, we are to approve the regular meeting minutes of March 9th, 2021. Are there any questions from trustees or staff? I don't see any. When we will open it for public comment.
No attendees.
Okay, great. And we'll close it for public comment. So I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
A second.
Jinder, can you call roll, please?
Hey, Trustee Duke Hughes. Trustee Hahn.
Aye.
Trustee Lentini.
Aye.
Trustee Ross. Chair Cortez.
Aye. Thank you. And now, excuse me, we will have the Marinette Collection Development Working Group presentation by Jamie Poirier. Did I get it? Poirier. All right. I was working on it. Our supervising librarian. So Jamie, I will pass it on to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jamie. So tonight I will be talking to you all about a collection development task force. Give me just a moment here, sorry, to share my screen so that everyone can see my slides. Or the rest of my desktop. Okay, there we go. So again, my name is Jamie Poirier. I think I've met all of you at least once, but just for those of you that I'm still getting to know, I am a supervising librarian here at San Rafael in charge of collections and circulation. And so tonight I'll be talking to you about this new Marin-wide working group focused on collection development. The MarinNet Board of Directors created a new task force related to collections actually just a few months ago. One of the questions on their minds is, are there other options for sharing physical items and or other ways that we could be collaborating together across Marin? Collectively, we spend $1.175 million annually on purchasing physical items like books and DVDs. Our collective budgets taken together may provide us with more or different purchasing power if we decided to leverage that combined. This task force is not set up to be a long-term working group, but is rather a group coming together just to explore these different possibilities and to see what we can implement. For instance, is there something else that we could do as we work with vendors? Or should we pull all of our purchasing power together in a different way, similar to what we do with ebooks and other e-resources? What has come out of this so far is that we've gained some knowledge and shared some information about how the different libraries in Marin, specifically the public libraries, are approaching collection development. So again, just to reiterate, we're really just trying to do some exploratory things. This is a temporary task force, so it's not expected to be a long-term working group. You know, some of the things that I'm really interested in is, are there things that we could be doing to eliminate duplication or to streamline our work to be more efficient? Is there something that we could do to hopefully fulfill customer requests and those high demand holds in a different way? A representative from each of the public libraries attend these meetings. And again, it's a very recent group. So we've had 2 meetings so far, with another one actually scheduled next week. So some of the things that we have figured out: who does the collection materials tends to be separated in each public library between children's and then a young adult and or teen and adult services combined. So it's not unusual to see children's and young adult separate from regular adults selecting. That tends to be the case in almost every single public library. Most libraries actually order weekly. There are a few public libraries in Marin that only maybe order monthly. One library actually orders monthly in some areas and weekly in other areas. And then what to buy, how those decisions are made. Obviously, we know that libraries use all kinds of different tools to select what to purchase. Some of this is publishers' recommendations. A lot of it is patron driven and patron requests. But then there's also review journals, book publications, those high demand holds where, you know, like when Barack Obama's most recent book came out, we had, I think, almost 400 people on hold for that one. Keeping an equity focus in mind is important for all of the libraries in Marin and any other relevant information. Are items pre-processed? And what this question is really asking is, are items coming to us in Marin on average at each library already ready to go on the shelf? Does it already have all the stickers that it needs? Does it already have all of the barcodes and all of that processing done? And there are some libraries, San Rafael is one of them, that gets items fully processed when it arrives. So that means that all that we have to do is maybe a couple things on the computer, check the item in, and it's ready to go. There are other libraries in Marin, though, that spend a lot of time adding the stickers, the barcodes, etc. And so if we're talking about moving to a vendor that offers that feature as you purchase from them, then that would be something that all of those other libraries have to get on board with if we decided to do that. And then another question that arose, which I think is interesting, is how long does it take between when you place the order and when you actually receive the material? And on average, it's 1 to 2 weeks for most vendors, but there are some vendors that it can take up to 2 months to receive their materials. So again, if we're looking at doing something different, these are all factors that we would want to examine. Sorry, hang on just a second. Okay, so just a couple of key takeaways, just to keep going on this. Looking at all of the different vendors that we use, Amazon, of course, has a wide variety of materials, and a lot of libraries do purchase from Amazon. I think actually almost everybody does. But the next most popular vendor that is used across Marin is called Baker and Taylor. They're a very large library-specific vendor, and I think that they actually work with Follett Publishing, or Follett recently bought them in the last couple of years. Midwest Tapes is another commonly used vendor. They are specific for audiovisual materials, so DVDs, audiobooks, music, that sort of thing. And then Brodart and Ingram are some of the other library vendors. And obviously, if you've done the math, you'll realize that every library uses at least 2 to 3 vendors. And then this is just a breakdown of what the percentage of that $1.175 million, how that's broken down. And this is for this current fiscal year that we're in. So 58% of that budget is dedicated to adult materials, 24% is dedicated to YA or teen, and juvenile materials, which would be children's. And then 18% of that $1.2 million is dedicated to multimedia. So again, all of this is just to give us a little bit of context for the information that we've already succeeded in gathering, while we look to see what else we could possibly do with our collective purchasing power. That's it. I know that that went kind of fast, so I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns, or yeah, just talk more about what this task group is for.
Are there any questions from trustees?
Sure, I'll start. This is Eric. Just how long do you see this working group? And I think it would be great to hear kind of what maybe next steps or recommendations. I know that you started scratching the surface, doing some digging in terms of how they order and what they order. So
Right.
yeah, maybe I'll pause there for a second.
Yeah, I would say there's no dedicated amount of time that has been set up for this. We do know that we don't want this to exist as a working group forever. I would say maybe 6 months to 2 years was sort of the rough estimate, you know, hopefully long enough to give us some idea of what we could do. As far as, again, that like collective purchasing power, and are there just different ways of thinking about how we're all approaching our business. Some of the, I don't have any answers for you for exactly what the next steps are, but I can tell you the things that we're still exploring right now is the idea of using something that they would call a leased book program, which works very much like how you lease a car. So there's a number of different vendors that provide something called leased books. And what that means is that you're basically renting the item. And then when it's specifically used normally for those high demand, high request things. So when that demand has lessened, you can send most of those items back, and then you can get a whole new crop of brand new titles where the demand is really high. That's actually what our current focus is, and what the meeting next week will mostly be focused on, because that seems to be perhaps a good use of our resources. Like you acknowledge, though, we are really just still in the beginning stages of this. So what exactly will come out of it, I think, is almost at this point anybody's guess.
Thanks. Yeah, I totally understand that you're definitely at the beginning. I think it's exciting. I think it's a great thing to look at. And yeah, I totally understand though how, been in working environments where you're you try to be part of a more federated system because there's a lot of benefits, but then you also don't want to lose that unique ability to go out and purchase things on your own that you know that your local community may need, or something that's going to benefit, the city of San Rafael. So just definitely curious to hear more as you guys progress.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with what you are saying, and think that that's why the board of directors decided that this could be at least an avenue worth exploring, knowing that you do have to have some dedicated staff time and bandwidth to do that exploration. And like I said, well, actually, I don't think I said this, but $1.2 million, like I didn't know that the collective budget was actually that much until we pulled this information together. Henry and Susan might have known that just from the meetings that they attend, but for myself, that was actually kind of startling. And so it makes me think about how San Rafael is working with our vendors. And again, is there something that we could be doing differently just from efficiency or serving the customers that much better? So thank you for that, Eric.
Henry, did you want to add something?
Just to chime in, the challenges of meeting that economy of scale is that the consortium as a whole hasn't agreed on the one vendor that they could leverage for that, and that 1.2 million is separated into 9 or 8 pockets. So the power of it, it sounds like a lot, but the power of it has not been realized yet. But we are on our way.
Right, and it may be possible that maybe not all of Marin is interested in doing this, but maybe there's some sort of side partnership between the libraries that are interested in consolidating a little bit more and using one vendor. So, and then, sorry, the last thing that I forgot to mention is that I'm actually chairing this particular task force. And so I think that that's part of why Henry invited me to make a presentation, because it is something that I'm actively working on. So if there's no other questions, I just, again, want to thank you all for your time. Oh, Jamie, did you have something?
Yeah. Is there any library who's not at the table?
The college libraries currently are not. And I think that part of that is because it's recognized that the needs of an academic library are different than that of serving a general public library. And depending on the scheduling, there are some libraries that might not be able to attend every meeting, but that's just how it is, I think, for most of our working groups. So all of the public libraries, though, are participating.
Oh, great. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, are there, it says, do I open for public comment?
No attendees.
Okay, thanks, Jinder. So thank you, Jamie, for coming and speaking. We look forward to hearing more in the future.
Yes, thank you so much again for your time.
Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to item 3, public comment from the audience regarding items not listed on the agenda.
No attendees.
All right, thanks, Jinder. So we'll close public comment. And so now we're moving on to matters before the Board of Trustees, and we are on item number 4, National Library Week. And I will assume Henry and or Jill are going to present.
I'll introduce Jill Harris, Supervising Librarian for the Downtown Library, and programming will be giving the presentation on National Library Week. Take it away, Jill.
So good evening, everyone. As Henry said, my name is Jill Harris. I'm Supervising Librarian. I know all of you, but just in case. So I've got just kind of a fun presentation, just for your information mostly, about National Library Week. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. All right. So as some of you may know, National Library Week was actually last week. This year it was observed April 4th through April 10th. So we just celebrated National Library Week, and that was acknowledged at the City Council meeting, which was very lovely. And I'm going to talk a bit about the history of National Library Week. So the American Library Association, also known as ALA, first introduced National Library Week to the public in 1958. So there had been sort of previous versions of national recognition of libraries, but National Library Week, kind of in its current form, sponsored by the ALA, first started in 1958. And since then, libraries across the country have continued to observe it every April. We take this time to celebrate the contributions of all kinds of libraries, public, school, academic, and special libraries, to celebrate library workers, and to promote library use, support, and advocacy. So a bit of the history. In the 1950s, researchers discovered that people in the United States were reading less and spending significantly more of their time, increasingly, listening to radio and watching television. Concerned about these findings, the ALA and American Book Publishers formed a nonprofit organization called the National Book Committee in 1954. So the goals of this committee were quite ambitious. They ranged from encouraging people to read in their increasing leisure time, to improving incomes and health, and developing strong and happy family life. And this is according to the history of National Library Week that can be found on the ALA website. So with assistance from the Advertising Council, the first National Library Week was observed in 1958. And the very first theme that was used for the first 3 years of National Library Week was Wake Up and Read. So this slide and the next couple of slides are going to have some, what I think are really cool and fun graphics that were created for the themes over the years, especially the ones from the late 50s and 60s are quite wonderful, as you can see. I love this one for a richer, fuller life, wake up and read. I love this little groovy happening that's happening in the middle one. As you can see, the one on the right is Peter May, famous for like concert posters and such. They had some pretty cool people working on their publicity. So National Library Week has, of course, evolved since 1958 in response to the changing advocacy needs of all kinds of libraries, from postmarks and stamps to print and broadcast media to Twitter hashtags and celebrity spokespeople. ALA has made use of the most current and relevant mass media channels to promote the value of libraries. This is another kind of cool old school promotional channel that was used is postage marks and stamps. Again, I just thought these were cool to see. Read and watch your world grow. Another wake up and read one. So through the decades, the basic purpose of National Library Week has remained the same, even as these different media styles and promotional styles have changed. And that purpose is to celebrate the importance of libraries in everyday life. Some of my personal favorite National Library Week themes are ones like this one shown that emphasize the sort of transformative, life-changing possibilities of a library. And there have been a couple different themes that have highlighted that, such as this one. So National Library Week this year, as I said, was observed April 4th through 10th. And the theme this year was Welcome to Your Library. And that was chosen to build awareness of how libraries have responded quickly and skillfully to the pandemic and how we've gone above and beyond to adapt to the rapid changes that have happened over the past year plus. And it brings attention to the idea that library resources and services have always extended beyond our physical buildings. And that's never been more true than during the pandemic. So for quite a while now, National Library Week has had a celebrity spokesperson or honorary chair, and this year it was Natalie Portman. And other recent past chairs include Melinda Gates, Olympic medalist Alex and Maya Shibutani, and Misty Copeland, the ballet dancer. And there are a few events and observances that are contained within National Library Week. So not every single day, but 4 of the different days within the week have different sort of themes or sort of sub observances. So Monday the 5th, the State of America's Libraries report was released, and that includes the top 10 frequently challenged books of 2020, which is a very popular document that is often cited and often a topic of discourse in the United States, even outside of the library world and the academic world. So Tuesday, April 6th was National Library Workers' Day, which is a day to recognize the valuable contributions made by all library workers. Wednesday, April 7th celebrates bookmobile and outreach services. And then Thursday, April 8th was Take Action for Libraries Day, which was a day to rally advocates to support libraries. And I am happy to take comments and questions at this point.
Thank you, Jill.
Unshare my slides, stop share. Okay.
Any trustee questions? Eric, Cheryl? I'll go, Jill. I just lost my train of thought. But one of the, oh, hi, Rob. So, well, first of all, thank you. So we were, happy that the city council had, I don't know, presented you all and your work for National Library Week last week. I would have just loved, I guess I would just ask maybe in the future if, well, obviously it's every April, and I assume at this time, but maybe the meeting before, if there are things like action, like I would have put that on my social, I'm not that social media and I'm not that social media savvy, but to even have notifications or things that we could have done just to acknowledge that would have been great. So maybe, in the next year, if we would just all know a little bit ahead of time, it'd be really great. So we can put some public acknowledgements to thank everyone for the hard work. So that was just one of the thoughts I had, but thank you. And I don't know if Henry or Susan were going to say something at this point, but the other thing I just wanted to let the board know is that I thought it was incredible that the city manager, Jim Schultz, right? That's his name, Jim Schultz, I think. Am I saying it wrong?
Yes, Schutz, no L.
Schutz, okay. But he gave a very long introduction of all of the things that the library was doing and really focused on equity. And I was really impressed that he was presenting to everyone about all of the work that you were doing. So I just wanted to congratulate you all for that.
I would echo what Jamie said. It would be really good to, just anything that we can do to help support, anything that we can do to help get the word out, the message, I think would be, we'd love to do that. And then, what were any takeaways? Anything from the week, anything that we might be able to amplify or that you guys took away from National Library Week this year?
It does often feel to me like sort of a bit of an internal library land celebration, even though it is so there is this emphasis on public acknowledgement. It often feels like it's more within the library community. So probably my biggest takeaway was that the state librarian sent out a message, or I think he forwarded a message from Governor Newsom about celebrating libraries, and Jamie shared that with the staff, which was wonderful. So that was just nice to hear, and that's probably my big takeaway from the week.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or anything else to add from anyone? I don't see any. Are there any public comment? Anyone for public comment?
No attendees.
No attendees, thank you. Well, thank you, Jill. Thanks for sharing. And we're always happy to hear about all the work that you're doing. So, and let us appreciate you as much as we can, you all. So next year. All right, thank you. Great, and now we will move on to item 5. That word, Ranganathan, and the 5 laws of library science. How did I do there, Henry?
Good. Thank you, Chair Cortez. It's also National Poetry Month, the month of April. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Yeah, I have the next presentation, Ranganathan and the 5 laws of library science. I will share my screen momentarily. And for someone who lived like a while ago, the point of this is how relevant the thoughts of this particular person are to our profession today. Here I go. Okay, can everyone see that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, Mr. Ranganathan, his initials are SRR, is a figure in library science for people that have studied library science, but very little known in the general public. I wouldn't be surprised if no one else on the board had ever heard of him before we started talking about him. His 5 laws, like I said earlier, offer a kind of common sense approach that's very relevant today. I think it's also interesting that these laws that were written some time ago still contrast to the stereotypes of what people think that libraries do and what they actually are about, and I'll go into that in more detail. And right now we are still working to kind of realize the sort of vision that he sketched out almost 100 years ago, if not more. And shout out to Jill Harris for helping me with this presentation and the staff report. Sure, her feedback was very useful. So Mr. Ranganathan lived in the end of the 1800s through 1972. He died at that time. He was a librarian and mathematician from India. Most notable were his 5 laws, and also this classification system called Poland, which is the first major faceted classification system. In the staff report, I go a little more into the facets, but there's like 5 different ways things are looked at, and I'll come back to this later in the slides. No one that I know of actually uses this system, but as a sort of concept thing, it was kind of big for its time. And his birthday is observed every year in India as National Librarian's Day. So he's best known for the 5 laws. They reveal underlying truths and challenges, and they are books are for use, every reader their book, every book its reader, save the time of the reader, and the library is a growing organism. I have a little card with them printed on that I keep on my in my ID badge, and I have it on my wall. You can't see it. So I'm going to go into each of the laws. So books are for use. What was very kind of revolutionary in its time, because back then books actually were chained to prevent their removal. So when you see those pictures of the chained books, it's not really a joke. It's kind of like what they used to do. And just the idea that you would actually remove a book from a library was not even part of the consciousness about libraries. So Ranganathan, he advocated for placing more emphasis on using the books than on preservation and archiving. And I think still the library is kind of seen more through the lens of preservation and archiving. For example, like the Barbier security guards that we would employ had a code name for the library as the archive. And I think that that's somewhat of a misperception about public libraries today that endures in the public consciousness. And refocusing on kind of like how people are able to access the library was kind of a big thing when just the idea of taking books out and borrowing them was not like common practice. And just to note that in libraries throughout the world, this still isn't like a sort of general freedom that you could actually remove things from the library, because I think there's still this emphasis on not like harming anything, keeping it preserved, keeping it away from anything that could do damage to it. And attendant to that is the stigmatization of a user who ends up the last person that checked out a book that was damaged in the 100 checkouts before. So kind of saying books are for use and they get damaged through their use, and we're totally cool with that because we want people to use them. And if that happens, we're not going to get really upset because we know that books fall apart, that's just part of their life cycle, and we're totally fine with that. We're not trying to preserve the book and not have it be damaged in any way, which may seem slightly counterintuitive. Next law, every reader their book. So this is that, you know, everyone has different tastes in reading, and we as library staff need to recognize that and discourage the workers from judging patrons or based on what they like to read. And surprisingly, this is still a thing, like overheard in the workplace, sort of disparaging popular reading in favor of literary fiction. Romance novels and graphic novels often are areas of a collection that are really popular, but libraries underspend on them because librarians kind of see that as not quality, even though people want that. So the thing is to recognize that we're here to give the reader what they want, every reader their book, rather than being gatekeepers. And our job is to kind of not really have an opinion in that sense, but to sort of respond to what the public is saying that they would like to have in their library, and being open to the diversity of genres and reading experiences. Like when ebooks first came out, I think many traditional librarians were not embracing that full on. Third law, save the time of the reader. So, you know, people should be able to find stuff easily. That this tags onto the discussion about Dewey versus a BISEC or bookstore sort of model where people can actually navigate the system without having specialized knowledge. And this is a criticism of an arcane system which presupposes sort of a specialized knowledge where general users can't actually find things. This is very obvious in the travel section. Dewey arranges the travel books by a very abstract system of classification where you can't easily find areas of the world within the range, and you have to kind of know the system to use it. Also, the use of new technology that we take for granted now, but it was new like 25 years ago. Keyword searching, library automation, and on top of that, instant messaging, and you know, other like new technology solutions that make it easier for people to communicate with us, and thus saving their time in kind of getting their either account issues, or you know, they're wanting to request a certain book. The more that we save their time, the more that we kind of like make their experience front and center to what we do. And the last law, the library is a growing organism. So we should constantly be evolving, because the collections we build will all eventually be replaced by the next thing. And you'll see this in like popular authors from 100 years ago aren't popular anymore. People don't want their books. There are some enduring books that stay, but most of the things get replaced, and we have to be sensitive to that, to sort of be constantly weeding to make room for the new items, and not holding on to things with desperation because we as librarians value them where maybe the public taste has moved on. When I was a younger person, Kurt Vonnegut was all the rage and everyone thought he was wonderful, but that has kind of changed. And so it's like, I'm not going to input my particular spin on this. I as a librarian, and we as staff, have to be sensitive to the constantly evolving public kind of need for the new, and what is you know, meets the needs of the currently evolving populace. And at the same time, we grow by embracing new technologies. We were very big with when the internet first came out, still are, and other digital technology, including ebooks, virtual reality, 3D printing, and also issues of social and racial equity, which the library is uniquely placed to address. So that's the fifth law. Just quick mention of colon classification. It uses 5 primary categories or facets. And this is just interesting because it's a different way of kind of looking at a classification system, where I would say Dewey is not faceted. It only has one kind of pathway. This one has these 5 facets: personality, matter or property, energy, space, and time. That's kind of trippy in a way, I would say. Energy, space, and time. The category of dental surgery, for example, is symbolized as L21447, and that's created by L for medicine, the number 214 for teeth, 4 for diseases, and 7 for surgery. I don't really know a lot about this, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the sort of open-minded thinking of Ranganathan. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I'll stop sharing my screen unless anyone says different.
Thank you, Henry. I found those 5 principles really interesting. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. I've never not heard that before. And he seems very ahead of his time. Any questions or comments from Rob?
I had a question. Do you think that back in the day they chained the books because it wasn't like there was mass production of books back then? So any one book that got ruined was a bunch of information that would be hard to duplicate? I mean, do you think there was some practicality in the reasons why they were back then during that time they were doing what they were doing versus the proliferation of knowledge and information in mass medium that allows for the public to have more access? And
Yes, I would say while I think back then when I initially was kind of made aware of the chaining of the books, it seemed more like the dark ages right before printing in the incunabula, where books needed to be hand copied.
yeah,
In the monastery chained. But I think what became clear to me more was that the chaining of books was actually a more recent phenomenon, more like in the 19th century.
oh,
And that you're right. The books, I think, since mass production, industrial revolution, have become much more kind of replaceable. And that, yes, the focus really was on preservation. And there was like chaining without chaining, like many libraries would just not be open to public browsing at all. You came to the desk and you had to ask, and then I go back there, you don't touch any of that stuff. But I think it's weird because it goes from sort of the middle dark ages to the more recent past.
thank you.
Yeah. Jill, did you want to say something? Go for it.
I do. I think you pretty much covered it, but just to put it another way, I think that chaining books or otherwise, like putting barriers between the public and books, is an example of sort of an unfortunate habit that we have in the library profession of kind of continuing to do things the way they've always been done. And that it was just kind of this holdover even after the media had changed and books had become more, less expensive, more commonplace. And so it's unfortunate that practice remained as long as it did when it didn't need to. And that, Ranganathan's idea was so radical.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Any other comments or questions? I don't see any. Thank you, Henry. Thanks, Jill. Are we open it for public comment?
No attendees.
Thank you, Jinder. So we will move on to item number 6, other brief reports on any meetings, conferences, or seminars attended by board members. Do we have anything? The only thing I was gonna add, but I'll probably just wait till Henry goes to the new library building update. Nothing, and seem not missing anything. Okay, great. Number 7, other brief program updates or reports on any meetings, conferences, or seminars attended by staff. I will let Henry take it from here.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm gonna kind of run through and then we'll have more time for the new library. Last time Measure D met, they reviewed the second quarter of fiscal year 2021. Friends of the Public Library, Friends of San Rafael met on in March. The focus there, because they're part of the working group, was also on the new library conceptual design process, Albert Park Library and Community Center building. They're also planning for some book sales on the lawn coming in June. The
Henry?
foundation, yeah.
Right. Is the Friends Bookstore open, or are they planning to open, or do you have any, do you? knowledge
Friends
on that?
Bookstore is open, as
It
far
is,
as
okay.
I understand. Yeah, they're way ahead of us. They actually mentioned in the meeting that us being closed has driven traffic to their location when they're open. Yeah, so
Right.
there's like a kind of nice
Okay.
effect there. Foundation, I think, met since we last met, and also the focus there was on the both the conceptual design process and what the next annual meeting will look like, whether it will be in person or virtual. I think they were talking about having something in person in the fall, but hopefully not when there's fires burning and air bad.
Yep.
Marinette board met, and the discussion there was on refining an RFP for RFID equipment. Talking about reopening and the collection development group that Jamie talked about, and the quarantine of returned items, which the county health officers told us we no longer have to do, which we'll be stopping doing very soon. Also, Scenic, which is our broadband connection to the internet that libraries enjoy, funded by the state, or we get discounts. We're renewing our Scenic contract for 5 more years, and we're just tentatively looking at pricing for if we were to put that at the mall. We haven't made any decisions. And there's an effort to buy a couple of book drops to place throughout the county. Mill Valley has always wanted something in Tam Valley to serve the county. The Tam Valley is county unincorporated, so those people that live there think of themselves as Mill Valley customers, but they're served by the county. So a book drop somewhere in that area, and one on Lucas Valley Road, where the mailboxes are between Miller Creek and the freeway. If you drive that way, there's one supposedly going to be put there. We also had an equity discussion where this is a standing item on the agenda where each library takes a turn to be the lead of an equity discussion. We talked about equity programming, which then led us to look at maybe doing another community reads type of thing, similar to the previous One Book, One RIN, but with equity at the center. And that would be more about the conversations around those books that would be jointly programmed as a MarinNet consortium. So we're still working on that. NorthNet board did not meet since our last meeting. So new library building update. I will defer to other members that were at that last discussion. And that concludes my update. Or if you'd like me to start it off, I can do that too.
Was
Can
the
I ask-
last discussion the site tour?
Oh yeah. Okay. Let me. So we had a discussion where we looked at the 3 options: the B Street option, the Courtyard, and the Plaza. We sought feedback from the group, and then we also Nolan Tam hosted a site tour that Mary Beth attended, and Cheryl, were you there? Yeah, and so we walked the site and talked about the different options, and then Nolan Tam sent out a poll for people to weigh in on the options that they liked the best. I think it wasn't like a unanimous majority anyway, but most of the people liked the B Street option with some caveats. And then earlier in the week, we had a staff meeting to talk about the inside of the building, which I could say more about if you would like. Did I leave anything out, Susan? No? Okay.
No.
So maybe we can talk a little bit more about the different options, the B Street option, or I defer to Cheryl or Jamie for their concerns or comments as members of the working group.
I wasn't able to attend. I just had a direct to everyone. I would say my internet is unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. So basically, yes, she had said that it was the B Street options. And I don't know, Henry, if you want to, are we allowed to pull them up? Like, is it public to pull up what they look like?
I think I have a copy right here. Let me see.
Okay. My concern, which I wasn't a fan of, was the for especially young people to go from the community center through the parking lot to the open space areas like the park and the children's center. So that's why I did not like it. But I think Allison was hoping that there were going to be continued conversations about how to close off certain parts of the parking lot during the day, or, possibly it was like, could you have a little bridge, something, a pedestrian bridge? I don't know, something like that. So I think there's still conversation. So I don't know what the next step is from that, Henry, but that was just a conversation.
Yes, we were shown an updated B Street option, which I can share my screen and then sort of elaborate what changed.
Great.
Okay.
The good news is that Allison and Nolan Tam incorporated a lot of that feedback into the version you're going to see, the schematic you're going to see.
Yeah, I don't have the one that Allison did, but this is, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
This shows the building mainly massed in the corner. Since they did this, maybe I can use my drawing tool. No, I can't do that. Sorry. Ignore that. This central area that's parking has an option to be bollarded off for fares. So we can block off the middle of the parking lot, and it will be a different treatment of the surface, more of a plaza feel. So the plaza runs out all the way to the playground and bollards at either end for like a farmer's market or like, an event or like that. They've also extended this arm of what they call the panhandle to project out a little more down towards the bocce club. And we looked at that first floor being an ideal location for children's, among others. This is just the other options are, this is the courtyard. And then there was a Plaza Scheme, which is kind of like it is now. But most people like this, and I feel like they're responding to feedback, so the design process is happening.
Henry, I'm confused because my feedback was during the day, not just about like for special events for it to be blocked off, but that piece, well, you can't see where my arrow is, but the piece from the
Here.
plaza going right down there was in between those two parking lots was, my understanding, my conversation with Allison was that during prime time when kids might be going back and forth between that it would be shut off, not just for special events, so that kids are not walking through like a parking lot, thinking about safety.
I think if they provide the functionality to make that possible, then we could decide when to implement it. So that was just the first thing that jumped into my mind, but you're right, it could be during school, times when children are passing, it could be during the middle of the day. I don't think that specifically sort of like baked in like when that would be, but it
Yeah.
provides the functionality where they showed it with a sort of different surface with the bollards at both ends. Which
No, I
achieves
understand that
function.
it's,
Yeah.
I understand that decision isn't made, but I'm just saying, to me, that was a big
Yeah.
reason and issue of why I didn't like it. So yeah, that's my comment, but.
One of the, some of the feedback that we got, you're not the only one who said that. But what's interesting
too.
to note is the current layout of the San Rafael Community Center. People have to go from the parking lot to get to the center, or go through the parking lot to get to anything. So right now, that's what we have. And all of the options that are out, eventually you have to walk from your car to get to some site. And in most of them, you have to walk through the parking lot to either get to the library, playground, or the park. In this schematic, there is a good opportunity here that when most people arrive here, they're usually arriving for one destination. So very likely, because it's it's got a double aisle, that you're either parking in most cases to go to the library, or you're parking to go to the playground or park. So you're going from your car directly to that location. One of the reasons why that bollarded area, or that parking lot area that Henry just showed you, that little square, the square area, the rectangle, right by the playground, is where they were talking about changing the surface material and the surface color even of that parking lot. So visually people could see, hey, I'm leaving one parking area as I'm going into this. Why is this different? So people are more alert that if it is open and people are transversing between one site and the other, it brings their attention to it. But it does have the ability to have sleeves and bollards in there. One of the key issues, and the reason why that would be an option, is the site already utilizes, and this is something that was not really, I think, well understood by all working group members. The entire parking lot area right now is completely used just for the purposes that are at the Albert Park site already. If we are to take out that entire section on a daily basis, there will not be enough parking to support the entire facility. And now we've added a library. So that was a concern, but the idea of having an option so we can pull that out to support, let's say, a Friends of the Library sale, or there's some kind of event going on, would be ideal. The staff brought up actually a really good point, was if we were having this, I think actually it was Jill Harris who brought it up. The comment was, if we have this parking lot section bollards off so you can't use it for special events generate more parking needs. So it'd be counterintuitive to get rid of that extra parking, but we'll deal with that if that happens. But just wanted to share that with you. If Henry wanted to show the other two schematics, you'll see what I mean by the parking. If you visualize you are in the parking lot and you want to go to the library community center, or you want to go to the playground park area, you are going to have to walk through the parking lot in every single one of them.
So here's what's this called? It's the Plaza Scheme. This is most similar to what is there now, and so you have to walk through the parking lot. I think people didn't like this as much because this sort of area between the community center and Safeway is sometimes an issue, and it's still there. And then the Courtyard Scheme, the next one, and that kind of pushes the building back and doesn't really solve some of the problems that the others solve. I think some people like this the best though, and because it puts the building right up against the Palm Alley, as it's been called. There's also contrary opinion that having the Palm Alley out by itself allows you to kind of stand in it and look up at the Mission, whereas having the building next to it kind of changes the view. So you can kind of see that in all three schematics, all preliminary schematics.
depending on where you're parking, you're still walking through the parking lot to either get through the community center or to the park. It really doesn't change much. And there's one where it actually is extreme. The parking is more up against Safeway. So you have to walk through the entire parking lot. As you can see, you have to walk all the way around to get to the playground and park field. So in every scenario, there really isn't a way to avoid that. And I think the option, based on the feedback that they received from the working group, of sectioning off that parking lot is a really good one. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Thanks. So is there a community garden over there right now?
That's not a community garden. I'm sorry. What Henry is sharing with you right now is a former schematic. They renamed it. That's the Lonatese Garden.
Okay.
That is actually in the San Rafael Community Center. It's surrounded by the community center, so it's hard to visually see unless you're in the building.
Okay, because because it says community garden. I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't I was confused about the use of that space for that, like adding something new that I was like, why now it makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Oh, you had the same. You were as puzzled as I was. I'm like, since when do we have a community garden there? So they just incorrectly named it. That's all.
Oh, okay. That's super. That's super helpful, actually. And then just on that library and community center, how many square feet is that? Yeah.
So the total amount is around 43,000.
And how much for the library? Yeah.
The majority of it. So that's roughly about 18,000 for the community center, which is what we have now, and the rest of it's library. I think the community center picks up another 3,000 square feet in some meeting rooms, the addition of meeting rooms, which the whole idea is the addition of those meeting rooms would be co-shared, not just those two, but all of them. So by adding a couple more in, there's more to be, obviously shared amongst both of the functions in the building.
So that's community meeting rooms, plural, then, not just a single ginormous room. Because I was like,
correct. There's right now there is a, if you were to go in the community building, you would see a giant, what we call the multipurpose room. Some people call it the ballroom. It's big. It's over 3,600 square feet. It's almost 4 something. Wow. And then you see approximately similar in size, 5 meeting rooms. 4 of them are public facing. One is a lounge that we often have meetings and things like that. And we're going from 5 of those to 7.
Okay.
Plus the ballroom. So, and then, obviously huge adult library section, huge children's section, elevators, restrooms on both levels, because it is 2-story, staffing areas for both staff. Because obviously the library staff, you're moving, 85% of the entire staffing for the library is at the downtown. So it's pretty significant staffing area compared to like the community center. There's only like 5 or 6 of us.
Is there going to be a storage area for like all the, is there a good storage space or warehousing?
Yeah. So a couple other things that they've indicated is there is, and you can't really see it here because this was the first pass. This isn't the most recent, but the most recent also shows a loading area, a loading dock area right off the community meeting room. So for banquets and stuff. We are also making sure that there's parking, at this point, it doesn't have all this detail, but I'll share this with you. There's also parking that's going to be indicated for people who are dropping off their books, book drop, to make sure that they're, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. And several of them at the front. So people have a place that they can park, run in, drop off their books and get back to their car. And one of the most significant things that has been called out is to make sure wherever the book drop is, that is against the library, right? So as somebody comes in to drop their books, that behind that facade, there is a huge area dedicated to staff and sorting of books, properly processing them, and there's sufficient space. So then also that's in proximity to an elevator. So once you've done all that, you can easily get it to where it needs to go, whether it stays on the first floor for the children's library, or you quickly take it upstairs to the adult area and the teens. And there's there's an elevator in close proximity, so you're not having to go transverse through the entire building to get to it. So
Thank you so much, Susan.
Sure. There's so much more detail. I mean, this is a concept, and honestly, concepts can be bubble diagrams. This is extremely enhanced version of a concept. I would say it's almost fringing on, and I'll lead it to Cheryl because this is her expertise, obviously. But this is almost getting into a design, a real design. Then you'd go into a final design with construction docs. So it's getting a little bit more elaborate than most concepts would be. But
Anything else to add? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, the only thing I was going to tell you is Nolan Tam recently told staff on Monday, the reason why they are going so forward with making sure this has enough elements and enough detail is that the city council had requested enough detail to compare it to all the information that they have on the Carnegie. And they didn't want just a bubble diagram, obviously, because they wouldn't be able to do that comparison. But also, they're trying to make sure that these concepts really would work, obviously, because if this site is ultimately selected, they want it to be strong enough that it could be considered as it goes forward into final design if the site is selected. Once again, if is a big question. After all, we still have the Carnegie as an option as well. That's it.
And so what's the next step? Or what's their Nolan Tam's next step?
So the next step is I'm going to have Henry tell you what the meeting is, but it's to bring it back to the working group. But I can tell you what happens after the process is over.
Yeah, we have one more meeting of the working group, and then
once we get the final design that is selected by the working group and all the questions are answered and we have enough detail, it'll be presented to the city council. And then based on the city council's direction, it could be, okay, now we would like, the staff to do a feasibility study or a funding plan, something of that nature. It really, at this point, we're not quite sure if they're going to select one of the sites before they do that, or they're going to ask us for that type of study to happen to help determine which site ultimately they're going to pick. But the whole goal is to drive this over some kind of finish line so we know which way we're going. We're either going with the Carnegie site or we're going with the Albert Park site. And we're hoping to take this to city council. We're hoping by the end of June. We'll see, we might make it.
Thanks, Susan.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Henry?
I believe that's all. There was a little bit of discussion of an outtime story time area that Jamie brought up based on something they did in Roseville, which was good. I think overall flexibility and function is like one of the goals also for a new library building. But yes, we've been keeping pretty close to the schedule, and we hope to get it to the council in June and to be very timely in this process. And I think we're pretty much achieving that.
Henry, do you remember what the next date is for the working group? For that, I thought it was at the
29th. I have on my calendar.
Yeah.
April 29th.
Yeah.
Wow, it's coming up soon. Gosh.
Yep.
When we made this calendar, it seemed like years away, and we're running through it. It's fantastic.
April 29th. Okay, it's on my calendar. Henry, anything else do you have on letter G?
Nothing except for just to say that our next big date is the reopening of the mall and the Pickleweed Lab on the 22nd of April. The county libraries, some of them are opening that same week. I believe San Anselmo, similar. We'll be meeting as a MarinNet board to talk more about reopening, but it looks like things are looking up for reopening in general, as long as we keep the same trend towards less COVID cases in our community. Notwithstanding a possible spring break effect, not sure what's going to happen, but the 22nd is when we're opening the mall and the Pickleweed Lab.
Also, So there is a couple more things that we want to share with you really quickly. Henry, do you want to share with them kind of the recruitment process?
Oh, right.
We have so many vacancies. That
Yeah,
are
we're working on filling 3 vacancies, 1 librarian, 1 senior library assistant, and 1 part-time library assistant. The senior library assistant and the librarian are full-time. We've had our initial round of interviews for the librarian and senior library assistant yesterday and today. We're going to have a day of interviews for the first round for library assistant tomorrow. There were approaching 100-ish applicants for the librarian and library assistant, somewhat less for the senior library assistant. We have a big emphasis on getting someone who's possibly bilingual in Spanish. And we're looking forward to adding 3 more people to the team that have been unfunded but unfilled positions during the budget crisis. And then we have authorization to fill 2 more unfunded but not filled positions starting July 1st. 1 senior library assistant at Pickleweed and another part-time library assistant.
So as those individuals come on, because it's a lot of work for Henry to onboard brand new staff, as you can imagine, because even if they're internal and they get promoted, then we have to fill their vacancies. So there's a little bit of a domino effect. But this is super exciting because what it allows them to do is then start phasing in even more hours and more options at the library, which is fantastic. We're just so thrilled that the city manager's office has given us the support to move ahead over a month ago to move forward before we even knew we were going to really reopen. So very, very thankful about that. Second thing I just wanted to bring up to all of you, we have met with several members of the council to go over the recommendations for the budget, recommendations for the master fee schedule. Both are happening at the same time, so I'm a little confused. Sorry about that. So the next step is to bring it to the library board. So you will get the benefit of what Henry has been providing, a huge overview and the recommendations going forward for the master fee schedule in relationship to the library. So very likely we'll be able to bring that to you in May. Recreation's taking a little bit longer because he has all the great news. So he doesn't have to worry about meeting with stakeholders to make sure that they're okay, because his recommendations are all super positive. Some of the recommendations on the recreation side, as you can imagine, because it's a revenue generation factor, are going to have huge feedback from certain stakeholder groups. So we're actually going to meet with all those separate stakeholder groups to make sure they have plenty of opportunity before we take it to Park and Rec Commission. And then eventually it's going to go to City Council, probably either in June or July for adoption together. So that'll be really good. I promise you that's it.
Sounds very busy.
Sure is.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Henry. Thank you, Susan. Any other questions before we close? Nope. So our next meeting is May 11th, 2021, and the future topic is review of the library board budget. And just as Susan said, some other possible updates at that time might be available. And unless there's anything else, we will close at 7:13 p.m.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Jamie.
Very much, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Susan.
Good night.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rob. Thanks,
Thanks,
Cheryl.
bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jim.